Welcome to the series, Her Story, My Story. And as part of that, we are doing Her Story Chats. And Her Story Chats are personal valley stories of women who have gone through valleys, but with the help of God, journey through them. And so that's where we are today. And so we welcome you. I want to put a disclaimer out there because there's a lot of information in these chats that we're having, Her Story Chats, that are sensitive, very sensitive. So I know some of you could be in the car and you could have your device on of whatever, and there are sensitive ears in the back seat or whatever. So we just put that disclaimer out. So we have Lynn with us today. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
So I met Lynn about a year and a half ago, maybe, and one of the things that, as Lynn told me a few of her stories, she said, I have a story, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I have this passion to do something with it. And so when we started these Her Story Chats, I thought of Lynn. One of the things we're doing with this series is we're talking about mountains and valleys and what we do with the hard things in life. And so that's where we are today. But first, let's talk about a peak. We've been talking about some timelines and our peaks in our lives and our valleys. Before we get to the valleys, just tell us a little bit about yourself or a peak in your life.
Well, when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, it was peaks don't just happen. They start in a valley. So it was really hard to just pick a peak for me. So I am married, and this is my second marriage, and we have a blended family. And my husband and I have been married for almost 22 years. At the beginning, it was a really hard endeavor between kids and exes, and very, very hard. And I prayed through it, and my husband's ex moved here because at the time we had 3 kids and probably 7 grandkids here. And a year later we moved to help and be with him. And anyway, it just was hard. And we would get together at the birthdays, and there'd be tension. And I just prayed that God, that through his love, we would break all the history down. And anyway, my peak is, for the last 4 years, we've celebrated Christmas together, all of us. My husband's ex, her husband, her mom, all of our kids, which we have 5 kids, and now have 14 grandkids. And so Christmas at my house is insane, but every year it's just gotten better. And because we just celebrated Christmas, I was thinking of my peak, and that was it. It's like everybody said it was the best Christmas they've ever had because we were a family. And my husband's ex, her mother, actually hugged me and said, thank you, thank you. I don't know anybody in my whole sphere that has this. And I mean, I didn't create it, it was God, but that we just persevered and just loved and loved. I mean, we do everything for our kids, I think, like most parents, but finally the walls for everybody just broke down, and now there's no animosity, there's no awkwardness when we get together.
Wow.
It's just amazing.
That is a God story.
That's awesome. It's family, which is what he wants. And I think, Jesus changes everything. And I think it just took time, and it's in God's time. So.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Thank you. It was a big peak this Christmas.
That was
great.
Awesome. So Lynn has a very unique story.
Yes.
Very unique story. And I think I'm just going to have you start and tell us what that story is.
Okay. Well, I was born into a family that my mom was full-blooded Japanese and my dad was full-blooded Japanese. And I lived in Sacramento, California. And 5 years later, my sister was born. And almost all through my life, I felt like I was different and really didn't belong in my family and definitely did not look like my sister. And but the stories my parents would tell me, how I was conceived, how they used to tell me not to mess with our bloodline because it's been pure for over hundreds of years, back to the samurais, and because I would date all different races, and they didn't care as long as I got married to a Japanese boy. And I was like, okay. And so all these things I've gathered that they told me, so it just kind of impressed upon me that they were true. It's like, okay, well, I guess this is who I am. But so when I was probably in middle school, I became very rebellious. Talk about a prodigal child. I was way out there. And anyway, it wasn't until later in life, after all those years of not knowing and feeling like I didn't belong in my family, I think my mom kind of just gave up on me because I was so wayward and just let me do what I wanted to do. And I got married. I had 2 kids. My marriage failed after about 13 years and wasn't walking with the Lord at all. But I always knew there was God and prayed to God, but everything else I didn't really get. And then I met my current husband. I met him at work.
Who, by the way, is not Japanese.
Neither of my husbands are Japanese. Totally white. And anyway, so I met my husband at work, and we started this crazy relationship. And but the entire time I introduced him to my family, and we would do family things, he'd say, "Where'd you come from? You don't belong in that family. You don't even look like them." And I just said, "Quit saying that. These are my parents. This is my sister." Mm-hmm. Anyway, so after years of teasing me, unfortunately, my mom passed away first. She died of uterine cancer. And then probably 3 years later, I was visiting Arizona, our grandkids, and I got a call from my sister that my dad had a severe heart attack and dropped dead. So we went back home, and we're getting ready to go to the funeral home to sign the papers because my dad wanted to be cremated, and we needed to sign those. So on the way to the funeral home, my husband said, "Okay, babe, this is your last chance. Do you want to find out or not?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Those are your parents." And I was like, okay, whatever. I kind of did it to satisfy him because I was thinking, I never really believed anything else. Mm-hmm. So we went and we're signing papers, and he called the mortuary woman aside and said he'd like to say goodbye to my father. And he said, so they went outside in the hall, and he said, "We have some DNA questions." And she said, "Well, this isn't normal. We don't normally let people in, but, we'll let you go say goodbye to him." So my husband went in, and he swabbed my dad. And we went home, and he put it in the freezer. And about a month later, he said, "Okay, we need to do you, and we'll send it in for a paternity test." And we did that, and that was in November after my dad had passed. And probably within a month and a half, we got the results back, and he said, "Babe, I got the letter. Do you want to open it?" And I said, "No." Mm-hmm. And so we didn't. And I said, "Put it in the safe."
So I need to stop right
Yes.
here, because one of the things that we teach is one of the things we have to do in our timeline, if we make a timeline, and if we look at our past, is to look in a mirror and own it. So at that particular time, you weren't ready,
obviously,
to
not.
own whatever. And you didn't
say.
even know what whatever was, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I just assumed it'd be, yes, he was your dad, and
Yes.
there you go.
Okay, go ahead.
But I wasn't ready, obviously, and so I put it in the safe, and I kind of forgot about it and was curious, but every so often, and I think it, like, so we were going on a trip in August to go to Fiji, and we were getting ready to pack up and leave, and I said, go to the safe and get the letter. And he said, oh, okay. So granted, this whole time my husband knew because he opened the letter, and he didn't make any, waves either way, so I just assumed we're going to open this letter on my vacation and it's going to be nothing. So I waited till the last day of our vacation, and I said,
Let me ask you, how many years ago is this?
this was 2016.
Okay.
16, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
And anyway, so we opened it, and so I'm reading all this jargon of markers, all this different DNA stuff. And at the bottom, it just says, the chances of, and then it had my dad's name, being the biological father of my name was 0.001%. You could have knocked me over with a feather.
So how did you deal with it? You're getting ready to go on vacation.
No, I'm already on vacation.
You're already on vacation.
My last night.
Okay.
And
how did you deal with it?
I just started laughing. That was my first reaction. I was so in shock, and I couldn't believe it. And then I started, of course, crying. And the first thing I thought of was that my parents lied to me my whole life, and they took it to their grave.
So you felt deception big time.
Deception, betrayal,
Uh-huh.
the things that they told me, like marrying a Japanese boy. I mean, just like all the stories, how I was even conceived was a lot, and then I started thinking, so like, what was the truth after all? You have to think, God, was that even true or whatever? And so I just had to be with it for a while. And then we got home, and my husband said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. Like, who is my dad? What happened? What's the story? And my first question was, I really wanted to know, so what ethnicity am I? Because I assumed that was my mom, and but I didn't know. So I sent my DNA into Ancestry, and yes, and my mom is my mom, and it came back that I was like 48% Japanese descent with all the islands, and then the other half is what blew me away. I was 48.9% Eastern European Jew.
So what does that do to a Christian? You're a believer, and you hear all this, and you were a believer at the time.
I was a believer at the time, and I just thought, well, first of all, my first initial thought was I was really upset because I wanted to be something exotic. Like I wanted to be part Greek or part Italian or something, and it's like Eastern European Jew. I didn't really even know what that was, but I obviously knew what Jew was, and then I used to tease my husband and say, well, I obviously one of the chosen people, right? Because I have Jewish blood in me. But yeah, that was really a shocker. It was really weird to find out who you thought you were is not who you were.
So what did you do with it? How did you go to scripture? Did you have a group of friends to get you through this? What did that look like?
It's funny because we started telling people the story, and one of the first people I told was my best friend in Sacramento, and she was like, well, we never really thought you were Japanese, Lynn, and well, this all makes sense. And so I started telling my group of friends, and then we said, okay, we're going to tell my sister. So we had my sister and brother-in-law come over, and I said, I have something to tell you. And I handed them the letter. And they were appalled and shocked. It was the most crazy thing I thought, because everybody else was like, well, we kind of figured it. And my sister, she said, why would you even do this? And I said, because I don't look like you guys. I don't really act like. And she said, well, I feel like I don't belong. And I was like, no, you look just like my mom and dad. Anyway, it was just that was kind of an ironic thing, but it was probably because I led a Bible study at that time, and it was all the girls just loving on me and, trying to help me. But it was like, okay, so now I have this new information. Now what do I do? Where do I even start? And so that was another journey, because when you call like investigators to help you, you're usually adopted, so they could take the paperwork or know the story. Well, I can't share any of the story because my mom and dad are both dead. And my birth certificate says my mom and dad that raised me. So it was kind of frustrating. It took about 2 years. And as God would have it, crazy enough, my husband and I were waiting to go to a wedding. And we were just watching TV in the afternoon on a Saturday. And an old Dr. Phil came on. I mean, it was probably like 15 or 20 years old. But there was this guy on there, and he located people. And I just looked at my husband, and I said, well, do you think he still, does this? Or do you think maybe he could find my dad? And he's like, I don't know. So immediately I Google, yes, he's still in business. He has a website. So the next week I called them and got the information and told them a little bit about my story. And they said, well, I think we can help you. And it takes about usually a year. I had already done, as I said, my ancestry, so I sent them my tree. And then the girl on the phone talked to me about, okay, so what do you want to do if we find your father? And if he's still alive, do you want us to contact him? Do you want to contact him? And she started telling me stories about what happens when the person searching contacts doesn't always go so well. And I said, okay, well then I'm pretty sure I will have you. Once you tell me, I'll have you. And so anyway, so in the meantime, as they're searching, my mom had one sister left, and I had reached out to her, and I just said, okay, I found this out. Do you know anything? And she said, I thought they told you. That was her. And I was just like, what? I said, well, what do you know? And she said, all I know. So my mom was a nurse, and she went to school in San Francisco. And she said, all I know is your mom came home from San Francisco, and she got pregnant by a doctor who was from South America. And supposedly he didn't want anything to do with my mom or me. And my grandmas, not biological, the parents that raised me, my grandmas were friends. So when my mom came home, they kind of arranged that my dad would marry my mom and take me on as his own, which he did. And so I got to tell the people that were looking for my dad the little bit that I knew, that part. Well, they said it could take up to a year. So probably within 6 weeks they called me and said they found my dad.
What did you do with that information?
I screamed a little.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, okay, well.
Wait a minute. Scream joy, disbelief, hurt. I mean, what's going on? I don't know.
I think it was joy, just to be able to start now putting the rest of my story together. But I had already thought, okay, my mom and dad are dead. So, and he was a doctor, so he had to be older than my mom. So he's probably dead too. And so they said, well, I'll send you the tree that they created for me, and they would get back to me and begin to reach out because he was alive.
And what happened?
And so I looked at the information on this tree and saw his name, because everything's public record, marriage, babies, when he came over from Argentina, it was just so weird. So the craziest thing is my dad, my biological dad, the information I found was I lived in Sacramento. My dad became a doctor in Antioch, which is probably 45 minutes away from my house where I grew up.
Oh,
So that was crazy.
that's crazy.
Anyway, so another God story is I got all this information. I wanted them to contact him. I called. I emailed for probably a month and a half. I even had my husband call because the company wasn't returning my calls. Mm-hmm. And then to this day, I've never heard from them.
Okay. How do you feel about that? You okay?
Well, now I look back and I go, well, God had a plan. I was angry, but I thought, okay, well, I have all this info. Let's see what I could find. So I started doing Google searches, and I actually found a picture of my dad. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, there were several people with his name, but he was the only one that was of that age. Mm-hmm. And I clicked on him, and the picture was from a assisted living home that they interviewed, or they highlighted a client every month. And so I clicked on that, and I was on my way to Bible study, actually, at Central here. And I called the nursing home, and I asked for him. And I didn't know if he even still lived there or what. And they said, well, you can call him direct. And I said, well, I don't have his number. And they said, well, we'll take a message. And she said, can I take a message for you? And I said, sure. I gave her my name, and I said, I think he's my dad. And she said, I'll have to not write that down. I think I'm going to go tell him.
Oh.
So I didn't hear anything, and after Bible study, we went to lunch, and somebody called, so I took the call outside, and it was him and the head of the facility, and she said, well, I have him on the phone. He has questions, and so he wanted to know about me. He wanted to know why I thought he was my dad, and he wanted pictures, so I text pictures of my mom when she was in nursing school, and he said, oh, I remember her. And then he said, okay, I guess you're my daughter. And I said, well, I'd really like to meet you. And I said, my sister's getting baptized over Easter, and we'll be right there. Can we come and see you? And he said, well, I have a daughter. You have to talk to her first. Uh-huh. So the very next day, my new half-sister called me, and we chatted. And I had her on speaker with my daughter and my husband there. Mm-hmm. And she was like, no, you have to. We definitely want to meet you. And I was like, really? And she said, but you have to come and stay with me. And I was like, my husband's like, we don't even know this woman. Aww. And something inside me just said, okay, we'll be there. Yeah. And so I get off the phone, and my daughter and my husband say, Mom, you sound like you were talking to yourself. Because my other sister and I, who I grew up with, I love her, but we just didn't have, I don't know, it was crazy. So that a month later, we drove out to California, and I met my dad and my new half-sister, and
Wow.
And he was so welcoming and so loving. He was just, it was so great. And he swears he doesn't remember. He remembers my mom, but he doesn't remember about me. And so he felt like it was a big surprise. And in the interim, I also found out I have a half-brother. So he fathered another woman. And when I talked to my half-brother, he asked me when my birthday was, and I told him. So his birthday's in August of the same year as my birthday.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Oh, wow.
I know.
What a story. Oh, wow, Lynn. Well, so do you feel closure?
Oh, very much. I mean, after meeting my dad. But also in hindsight, looking back, I just know that, and God keeps impressing on me, it's his timing.
Yes.
I mean, at first I was angry with my parents for never telling me, but I don't know that, obviously that wasn't how it was supposed to be. and that his timing, I had gotten baptized already, and I was really in the Word and leading Bible study and just trusting him. And now in hindsight, I know that it's exactly how it's supposed to be.
Well, in wrapping up, whoa, what a story. I mean, I have 4 out of 6 adopted grandkids, but we're talking about adult.
Yes.
This is during your adult life and what you do with it. And wow, what a story. And I think that what keeps going through my mind is we know that we are a cherished child of the Most High God.
Mm-hmm.
So did you just have to say, as we're closing here, Lord, I am just your child, and just envelop me?
I think all of that. The other half that I think was super powerful that I've taken forward was, I had judgment with my parents, both my mom, who was very distant from me, and, it's like I always tell my friends, we don't know the story, even though we think we know the story about other people. And so as I found out my story, it's like I had empathy for my mom. I don't think it's what my mom planned, but thank the Lord there wasn't abortion back then, and that, thank the Lord, this man who was my father that raised me stepped up, and they just loved me to not even believe I was anything else but their daughter. So I know that that's how God feels about me, and so it helps me as I go through life that not to try to judge people about whatever, because there's always a story. That's why I love this, because I think we all have a story that's important, that everybody can connect it some way.
I love that. We don't have your story, that's for sure. It's a
Part of
very
it.
unique story,
Right.
but I love the fact that what you said, that
We all do.
we all have a story. And that's what we're doing with the Her Story, My Story series. We're excited that you can go listen to the podcast about making a timeline, and we talk about our peaks, our valleys. We talk about looking in a mirror and owning the past, even though sometimes it's hard, and what that looks like. And the reason why we have bricks here is because we need to come to a point where we unload the bricks in our backpacks. And thank you, Lynn. This has been so awesome. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You just exude Christ, and your story has been, wow, what a story. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It was an honor.